listening to the Blue Skies Leadership Podcast, featuring discussions with international school leaders about the future of education. The podcast embodies the spirit of reciprocity by sharing strategies and change initiatives from leading schools around the world. Here are your hosts, Dan Kerr and Daniel Mendes.
Welcome to Blue Skies Leadership, a podcast dedicated to exploring the future of education in international schools. Today, we're thrilled to have Sheena Nabholz, a seasoned educator with an impressive international career, joining us. Sheena has held leadership roles in various countries and is currently the Deputy CEO of the Academy for International School Heads, and you might know that as AISH.
Yes, Sheena's journey is truly inspiring, from teaching high school math in Canada to leading schools in Africa and the Middle East. Her experience is vast. She also has served on the boards of ECIS and AISH, bringing her unique perspective to governance and leadership.
Yeah, we're excited to dive into your experiences and insights today, Sheena. Thanks for joining us from beautiful Toronto, Canada.
Thank you.
I have to say, Daniel and I have been very excited to talk to you for a while now. Well, as you know, this podcast is all about engaging leaders from across the globe, sort of about the future of education and an exchange of thoughts, innovations, perspectives that really are going to be important for all of us as we navigate this changing landscapes. If it's okay with you, let's just jump right in.
So, Sheena, what does Blue Sky's vision of school look like for you? Where is the world of international schools heading?
Let me just preface it by saying that my time at Search Associates taught me that the world of international schools is a lot bigger and a lot broader and a lot more diverse than I had previously understood from my time working overseas in the international schools I'd worked in. And I realized, I think about where are we headed? There's no collective we sometimes around that, because there's just so many different contexts out there. And some schools are just in a different place than perhaps the schools that I led or the schools with whom the Academy for International School Heads works. Kind of narrow. I'm going to circle back and say, okay, here's where I see the schools that we engage with most frequently, some of the things that they're talking about. Because there's definitely themes within those conversations, right? People are talking about AI. They're talking about new emerging technologies. They're talking, of course, about wellness post-pandemic. That's become a huge conversation. The global teacher shortage, inclusion, the use of data and personalized learning. Where will school be in the future? What kind of world are we preparing our students for? The entrepreneurial lens and approach to teaching. Those are some of the conversations that I'm leaning into right now, those spaces. At the same time, I'm also really interested in what conversations are happening in some of those other schools that I don't currently have a connection with. How do we create those bridges and hear what they're talking about? Because they're educators. They've got to be talking about things of value as well. It just may not be the same conversation as we're having in our more Western-centric environment and context.
That's so exciting, because that's why we wanted you on the podcast, is you have such a beautiful sort of balcony view of what's happening around the world in different regions. But I love what you talked about, those sort of initiatives that are happening from your lens are really what's happening on the ground here for us at SSIS. We're talking about data. We're talking about belonging and wellness. We're certainly talking about AI. So it's nice to hear that we're connecting to the same sorts of things that you're seeing.
In your opinion, what should we all be prioritizing?
I think it's all about connectedness right now. Right? Making sure that the world is increasingly connected, that we're connecting students to their environment, to their communities, to ideas, to emerging technologies. And I think that nothing has changed in that sense from when I first became an educator. It's preparing students for the world in which they're going to live. It's just the world in which they're going to live so vastly different, than 1990 when I first started teaching. I think right now there's just enormous, immense global challenges, conflict, climate change, scarcity. Again, students need to become ever increasingly more connected locally and contextually to their environment.
That's an initiative that we're thinking about too. And we agree with you that idea of connectedness around the world, but also at a micro level to their own individual communities, right? Connecting our own kids to ourselves as a school and to our local community, which then sort of moves beyond that. Hey, listen, I'm going to transition just quickly into something you mentioned as one of the initiatives that schools are sort of grappling with these days. And that's the idea of artificial intelligence and AI. And schools really are integrating AI technologies into their educational frameworks. And I was curious from your perspective about what kind of potential do you see with these technologies, with the ability to transform teaching, learning, and sort of administrative processes in the future? How do you see that going?
I think that schools should be embracing AI with joy and with curiosity and with enthusiasm. I see it through two lenses. I see it through the work we do with AISH on teaching and learning and how we equip heads of school to lead or create, foster, implement a vision for learning that's exciting and future focused. I also do work on governance. And so what I'm also hearing and what I'm also seeing in that particular space is that sometimes schools don't have the guardrails in place yet. And from the top level, from the board level, trickling down through policy to really make sure that privacy laws and that schools really have a sense of a clear philosophy of how AI is going to be used. I've heard stories, I've seen, talk to educators where teachers are like joyful abandon, exploring AI and hear things. I'm like, well, what about, and they're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. There's been no conversation in their school to date about the necessary guardrails. And that alarms me, from a governance standpoint and from the work I do in that arena. But at the same time, I have a daughter who's a young educator herself. And so she's sharing with me some of the really cool things she's doing in her classrooms using AI. It's a whole new world that makes me want to go back into the classroom.
Sheena, working with teachers day to day, some of them are excited to use it. Some of them definitely are hesitant to use it. But I always go to students and I always go like, what message are they hearing? What consistent message are they hearing from the teaching community at our school? And basically we are working together, coalescing around some common guidelines as to how to approach it and what to do. To be honest with you, people are wanting that. Even the people that are hesitant or the people that are really excited to try it, they want to have a little bit of stability around them because it's changing all the time. Yeah.
And I love that you brought in the idea of governance, because if you're not careful, it can probably get away from you very quickly. And it is changing so rapidly that having those boundaries or those guidelines in place, protection, policies, procedures, those kinds of things are going to be extremely important as we figure out how we're going to navigate this as we move forward. But what an exciting time to be in education,
sure. Right? And just yesterday, I was in a conversation with Lauren Evans from an organization called Unconstrained, and Beth Goldstein, who works at Babson's Youth Impact Lab. And we're trying to bring these two people together who have never met each other, never worked with each other, to create something for our AISH Oasis Day in February in Washington, D.C., where we sort of talk about how, these emergent technologies using AI can help foster the entrepreneurial approach to teaching and learning that Babson is so deep into and through their work. And Unconstrained is just, I don't know if you're familiar with them, look them up. They're a really exciting organization and really helping teachers really ideate around what can be done using artificial intelligence in the classroom.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Sheena. I just want to start talking a little bit about belonging and how are international schools addressing issues of equity and inclusion, ensuring that all students have access to high quality education, regardless of their backgrounds.
Different school contexts are very different. We would ask our member schools every year, where are you in your journey? And sort of 3 or 4 or 5 questions about what the school was doing in regards to a DEI strategic plan or action items, professional learning, policy. And we got all kinds of answers on that. I think it's like the continuum of intercultural development. You've got some schools that are still in denial. They're still saying we're an international school. It's in our name and therefore we're diverse and we're inclusive, completely blind to what's really happening and really unwilling to kind of lift the rocks up and look underneath and see and hear how people are actually experiencing their life at their school. All the way through the schools who have taken the first steps, perhaps. Heads are kind of flailing. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to lead this, but they feel a sense of responsibility to their community to dip their toes in this water. Those who have done it, and then it's enormous backlash where, it's just their school's on fire because of issues that have emerged as they've done this work. And then there's a few schools, who really are the beacons, who really have done this work well. And of course, they're the case study, the ones we want to emulate and study and watch how you did this. I think where AISH is leaning into this conversation is acknowledging that heads of schools, who we serve for a member organization for heads, that heads want to do this work, but they don't know where to begin. Whether it's because they're on their own journey towards intercultural competency, or they're unsure of how to navigate controversial topics within their community, and they need help, defining that language and coming to an understanding of, like, I can do this. This is the steps I would have to take, and what do I do if things just flare up and go sideways. But I think we all agree that, if you put the child at the center, as we should always do, this becomes an amazingly important work.
Yeah, I think I'm glad that you touched on at the beginning of the answer about context. We're dealing really deeply here in Southeast Asia and Vietnam about that very idea, the idea of high context cultures and low context cultures, and how it does change sort of from region to region. I remember being in Paris not that long ago. We did this work pretty deeply, but it was a different type of work. And coming here to sort of a more of a high context culture, we're very excited to have Dr. Derek Gay join us in about a month from now to help us navigate what it looks like for our particular school and our particular region. And that's going to be really exciting for us to be able to step into this work, I think, really, really well, but in the right context and in the right frame of mind for our kids and our community. And I think that you would agree with that. I know that you've worked with Dr. Derek Gay, or at least would support his work. You've seen him all over the world.
Yeah. Jeff Paulson, our CEO, and I are actually going to Panama in December to do a 2.5-day on site with Dr. Derek Gay, where he's working with the Latin American heads of school. And so we want to, again, get to know his work more deeply. We're looking at having him do a variety of things for us, whether it's teaching a course for heads and aspiring heads, but we're also looking at having him doing some facilitation at our summer seminar, which is an annual event we host each summer for heads of school, aspiring heads of school, and that will be held in Austria in July. So I'm super excited about that because, again, I think for so long people have been talking about the work that needs to be done around belonging and inclusion, but no one has really been giving heads the necessary tools to feel that they can address the polarities within their communities effectively.
So if we get this right as schools, which I hope we all do at some point in the near future, what does that look like for kids? Like, what kind of impact is this going to have on the learning environment or cultures of schools? What's the positive outcomes of all this, do you think?
Oh, gosh. I mean, just a real positive sense of self, right? An acceptance of one's own identity and the realization that you can embrace your identity, explore it, love who you are, but still feel like you're a member of a community in which many of the members don't look like you or believe what you believe, and yet you still can manage to fit in.
Yeah, I love that. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Having spent 20 years in international education, I definitely seen communities change as expats are less and less in a lot of these international schools, and a lot more of the local community actually part of that. It's a great data to kind of think about. Speaking of data, how are international schools using data analytics to inform and improve teaching practices and personalize student learning experience, in your opinion? Yeah,
I think that this is something that, if I'm grateful to anything to the pandemic, it was perhaps that opportunity to really, really think about the personalization of learning and really having to connect more with students as individuals. And I think that more and more schools are prioritizing the resourcing of positions like Director of Student Support Services to oversee that. Because, of course, the work that they do in fostering inclusion benefits all students. Because I think every child is served when teachers are better at serving students on the margins. And so I think that finding the tools, finding, people who can support teachers as they try to make sense of the data is really important. because I think there are a lot of teachers that get the data, they don't know what to do with it. They need someone to sit shoulder to shoulder with them and say, well, here's what the data says to me. And being comfortable with just the fact that good data makes you ask more questions, and using the data to be curious about what could be possible in the context in your school.
Yeah, we all bring our biases when we look at data. Using a good protocol to how around the table to look at the data and just let the data speak around the table is very valuable.
Yeah, schools, that's the thing about schools in our experience is that schools are awash with data, right? We all have it. We all find ways to sort of get it from different areas, standardized testing or classroom assessments or whatever it is. Those really great schools around the world really use that to inform teacher instruction and to drive sort of student learning. And I love the idea of having someone, that belly button to push, so to speak, where there's someone in charge of looking at that data analytics, maybe pushing into classrooms, working with teacher teams and working with, so ultimately it does impact each individual student's opportunity to learn. And it really gets to that personalization piece. And I think if we use data really, really well, there's a potential to maybe even look at sort of individual learning plans for each student, and maybe not just students who are in learning support or EAL, but for everybody in our community.
Absolutely. We have a partner called Curriculum Associates, iReady, and they've got a wealth of resources for teachers to use in the classroom and for schools to implement. And I think that the rise of tools like that are also really invaluable because they kind of get away from the traditional standardized testing that perhaps we've come to question the efficacy of that and the value of that in doing what you described there, Dan, in terms of personalizing learning.
Yeah, in terms of keeping that data point external helps for a teacher collaboration to just focus on the data and focus on the results rather than what am I doing in my class that's different from your class, and just having that professionalism of, okay, how are we going to improve these scores, or how are we going to have more personalized learning? I love that.
Yeah, Sheena. So one of the tenets of this podcast, one of the things we're very excited about, like I mentioned to you before, is that we get to highlight certain organizations and certain schools around the world. I think it's important with that idea of reciprocity, just to be able to see what people are doing all over the globe to help each other. So I kind of want to end with a question over to you about what does it look like at AISH? What are the kinds of things that are happening in your organization that you'd like to highlight? We'd love to hear a little bit about the work that you're doing in your role and your organization, because I know it's such an impactful organization for international education world, and I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking about.
Yeah, thank you. Last October, we had a retreat in Dublin. We devised this new strategic plan. And out of that plan, we realized, wow, there's a lot of work to be done. A lot of the goals and ambitions that we have at AISH. And from that, really, my new job as Deputy CEO emerged. And really what Jeff and I are trying to do is bring together organizations from around the world. There are a lot of thought leaders in education today. And how do we kind of gather those people and create a network and form these nodes where conversations can happen and work can be done together that's really accretive to the work of schools around the world? And so, I mean, that seems sort of perhaps existential, a little bit hairy-fairy, but really that's what it's about. It's just having conversations with people and seeing what we can bring together, what we can do, enrich the professional learning of heads of school.
Excellent, Sheena. And if I wanted to connect with you, what's the best way to connect with you?
LinkedIn is probably the best. It's the one I probably am on the most. You can go to our website and there's a link to email us. But, really, if you want to message me on LinkedIn. That'd be perfect.
And I think, am I going to see you at AirCoast coming up? And are you also going to be at AIE? Like where are you going to be this year? Connect with you.
Oh boy, it's a lot of travel. Beginning of October, I'm in London for the Child Protection Task Force meeting, and then on to NISA, then on to AirCoast.
Wow.
And then back home, and then to Panama for Dr. Derek Gay's workshop, and then AIE, and a few schools in between there to do some governance work and coaching. It's exciting.
Well, it is exciting. And can you please, from the two of us, say hi to Jeff Paulson? I've been following his career for a long time, and we really are inspired by the work that he's done, not only as a head of school, but in AISH organization as well. And we hope to connect with you both at some point. I'll certainly say hello to you and hopefully give you a big hug at Air Coast when we finally get to meet face to face.
Yeah, maybe we can give him a little nudge to get him on the podcast in the future. So
I'm sure he would. He'll be far more articulate than me.
No, Sheena, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights and experience with us. Your journey is truly inspiring. So thank you so much from Blue Skies Leadership Podcast.
Yeah, and enjoy the last couple of days of Toronto summer. Fall's coming. You're going to love it.
Appreciate that.
Okay, Sheena, thanks. Wonderful to talk to you today.
Bye, guys.